So the other day, I was doing some maintenance on my son and his wife's new home, and I was using a portable light, an LED light with a big honking battery. And as I'm with my head in the cabinet, the light flickers out, and I'm stuck in a cabinet in the dark. And I cursed the inconvenience of that light that had the audacity to fizzle out while I needed it. Now, that light, that handheld light that was standing up in the cabinet, was the culmination of thousands of years of human ingenuity. And I dismissed it with a wave of my hand because it wasn't working when I needed it to. We're deep into the celebration of Hanukkah. We've referenced lights throughout our service. Chag HaOrim, in Hebrew, the Festival of Lights. So tonight, I want to explore what I think is a fascinating history of humanity's relationship with light. We take it for granted. It's as easy for us as a flick of a finger, a little switch turns a light on. But really, about a few hundred years ago, light was actually revered as a sacred emanation from God. Just a few hundred years ago. And less than 200 years ago, 1880, Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. Now, he thought he was just giving human beings light, convenience of light. But what he didn't realize was that he was changing our entire relationship with light as a concept. He changed the way we see the world. Now, we who've only known on-demand brilliant light have no idea what it was like. It's hard for us to imagine what it would have been like to live in a world where the only lights we had were the flickering lights of a candle, of a fireplace, of an oil lamp. Could you imagine what it would be like to gather in here in the evening, the dark days of winter, with those flickering lights? Shadows would be cast on the walls, and they'd move with the flickering of the candle. We're used to steady light that keeps shadows solid unless we move. But in the world before electric lights, light was always flickering. Think about a fireplace as the only light in the room. Your eyes would strain. What was it like to read a book next to a flickering firelight? What was it like to return home? You're going to return home, chances are your lights are going on automatically, your garage light goes on when the door opens, movement turns on lights. Only 200 years ago, people would go home to a pitch black house, and tonight especially, there'd only be a sliver of moon lighting the sky. Even today, even with our modern knowledge, light is truly mystifying. From X-rays to infrared, they're all forms of light waves. Most light radiation actually is invisible to the human eye, and we just take that knowledge for granted. Nothing can travel faster than light, and upon reaching the speed of light, time actually slows down. Wrap your head around that if you can. Does anyone actually understand how your TV or your computer screen light up? How they work? I mean, sure, you may get the science, but could you make it at home? No. So the first paragraph of Genesis actually reveals to us the way the ancient world understood light. Now listen carefully. It begins with the Hebrew, Bereshit bara Elohim. When God began to create heaven and earth, God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness was called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, a first day. That's the first paragraph of Genesis. There's a problem that we recognize with that first paragraph in the order of creation. Sun and moon and stars weren't created until the fourth day. So in the mind of the ancients, light existed before the sources of light existed. God could speak light into existence as they understood it. So to understand light from their perspective was to understand something about God's essential nature. And to see light refracted through stained glass windows in churches or lenses or crystals in those days, polished crystal, was actually to channel that sacred essence of God. A few weeks ago, a group of us went from the temple, went to the Getty, and went to the exhibit called Lumen. Now, I was so enthralled, I bought the book, and you see the cover of the book has the colors of the prism. And believe it or not, and you can tell by the way I'm going to geek out as I get into this, I actually read this cover to cover. I really did. Didn't miss a word, and looked at all the pictures too. So it was called Lumen, the art and science of light from 800 to 1600 CE. In antiquity, light was truly mysterious. Light, as I said, was sacred. It was enigmatic. Where did it come from? It had power, even power beyond what we associate with light. And as I said, it was not a reflection of the divine. It was sourced by the divine. And we still carry it forward in our own lexicon, the way it's manifest in words we use. We sang the song, we just took for granted the references to light, and they resonate for us. Light, we talk about light as illuminating a problem. A light bulb goes off over our head when we get an idea. Now, of course, we need Edison to get the light bulb to go off, but you get the point of light connected to thought. We shed light on a topic. Those metaphors work for us because they come out of an ancient understanding of what light meant for human beings. And darkness then, and that's why that first paragraph of Genesis separates darkness and light, darkness then is more than the absence of light in the mind of the ancients. Darkness was the very negation of truth and wisdom. Darkness was the negation of God. To obscure a truth, coming from the Latin obscurus, Latin for darkness, was to cover up that truth with some veil that kept that truth from being revealed. When traditional Christianity calls Satan the prince of darkness, it was about more than being in a place where there was no light. It was about being separated from God's light. And so on and so on and so on. Have fun. Google different interpretations or meanings of light, and you'll see all the countless hits that you get. So for centuries then, given this understanding of light, churches were designed so that the play of light from the flickering candles at night or the radiant sunlight by day would evoke a sense of reverence and awe in the worshiper's, not just imagination, but really deep within the worshiper's heart. Paintings incorporated halos around sacred figures because light reflected or light represented God's presence. You can look at medieval paintings and see light beams coming from God to the subjects, whether it was Mary or Jesus or the saints. It didn't just symbolize their connection or their sacredness. It symbolized the means through which God actually touched those individuals. It was the way that God reached out to humanity. So then you go to a church, you look at stained glass windows, and you say, wasn't that beautiful art? You think about the artists that created it. But it was more than just visual art for the medieval churchgoer. The refraction of light was a mystery. The luminosity of the colors was mysterious, illuminated, shining through the church onto the structures below, whether it was the faces of the worshipers or the floor or the seats. Those colors that somehow made it from the window onto the floor, it was a mysterious occurrence. They didn't understand how it happened. In antiquity, Islamic scientists translated Plato and Aristotle's treatises into Arabic, and then from there into Latin. They were accessible to Jews and to Christians through the translations of these Arabic philosophers. And Jews found, and Christians found, medieval descriptions of light, the understanding of how light was refracted through crystals and through water. And all those ideas drew then those ideas of Plato and Aristotle into the thinking of the religions as they were evolving during the medieval era. Inspired the thought of such greats, such Jewish greats as Maimonides, the Muslim philosopher Avicenna, and Thomas Aquinas, the great Christian contemporary of Maimonides. They even debated how we see. Some argued that light or something was projected from our eyes, kind of like Superman's X-ray vision or a Marvel character's X-ray vision, and it was then lit up the object, and that's how we were able to see it. Others said, no, light comes into our eyes, and that's how we see what's out there. Our eyes then became magical receivers or transceivers, not just windows into the soul, but somehow able to utilize that divine light to our benefit. Why is there so much gold in religious art? Why, when you walk into a church, is it gilded? Is the altar gilded? Why was there a golden menorah in the temple? Because gold was seen as being a mysterious substance that was able to capture the light and hold on to it and reflect it back. Light was forged then, gold was forged because of its association with the sacred light. So from the temple menorah to the symbolic objects in a church, I was in a beautiful church in Oaxaca recently, the entire ceiling was gilded and the light flickered off the gold gild in the ceiling. Even references to gold in literature captured that essence of godly wisdom. Here's a passage from Maimonides' Guide for the Perplexed in his introduction. He says, in terms of speaking about knowledge, imagine a golden apple overlaid with a filigree of silver. When seen at a distance or looked at superficially, it's mistaken for a silver apple. But when a keen-sighted person looks closely at the apple and looks between the filigree, what do they see? They see that the apple is gold. That was Maimonides' metaphor for the knowledge that he was going to reveal to his student. So when light is characterized in literature that comes from before the 17th century, including the Bible, it's far more than a convenience that keeps us from tripping over our dog at night. God leads the Israelites from Egypt with a pillar of light at night. There's no reference to what the source of that pillar is. It doesn't say there was a spotlight shining from the ground or a spotlight or a star shining from above. It just says it was a pillar of light. And it was likely understood as some divine essence, some power of God that was guiding them through the desert. We have Psalms. Adonai is my light and my salvation. God's miraculous emanations preserve one from death. Isaiah says, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. God's incandescent protection for the prophet was palpable and real. On my talit, I have these words. Then it's from Isaiah. Then shall your light burst through like the dawn, and your healing spring up quickly. The belief of the prophet was that somehow God's illuminating radiance would save and heal people physically, not a metaphor, a physical transformation. Ki ner mitzvah v'torah or, says Proverbs. The commandment, the mitzvah is a lamp. The teaching, Torah, is a light. So that word or, light, when it's used, is not just or from a Klieg light or a flashlight or a bulb. When we call Hanukkah Chag HaOrim, the festival of lights, it's not about those lights shining behind me. They're the symbol. It explains the Maccabees' victory over the Greeks. God's light gave them strength. God's light made their victory manifest. That's what ancients believed. It's the light of creation that empowers and enlightens. So by the time you get finished lighting your Chanukiah, the 8 days of Hanukkah, you'll have lit 44 candles. Take away the 8 shamashim, the one that's in the middle, 36. Not an accident. 2 times 18 chai, his life, 36, and twice 36 is 72, according to the mystics, the mystical names of God. So in those numbers, even for the lights, the ancients saw deep symbolism. So when the days of Hanukkah are complete and you've illuminated all 44, you get 45 in a box, just in case you break one. On that last day, when the collective light of 9 candles shines the brightest, And the light is reflected off the faces of those who gather around your Hanukkah. Perhaps you might remember the blessing from the book of Numbers. It starts, Yivarecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, but it continues in the second line, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka. May the light of God's face shine on you and be gracious to you. We see it as a metaphor when we read it today. In antiquity, the light of God's face was healing and power and might and salvation and redemption. And if it shined on you, you received that light. The light of Hanukkah then was seen for thousands of years as truly the light of God, light of power, the light of redemption, the light of hope, not metaphorically or symbolically, but at its essential core. By that divine light, we see the light. It's a light that allows us to increase the luminescence of our intellects. It's a light that expands and glows in our own life force, that energizes us and enervates us. And it's the light of God that empowers us to be and to do and to hope and to live, and most importantly, to dream. Always, always to dream. Ken, here